The world is not as it should be. It's filled with distortion, and ruin can no longer be avoided. Those who oppose fate and desire change. From time to time, they were referred to as tricksters. You are the trickster. Now is the time to rise against the abyss of distortion.
Persona 5. What can I say about you that hasn't been said by other reviewers, and better? What can I say that will do you justice? I'm gonna argue there's not a lot, so in an attempt to not be original at all, or to even find any new insights into the game, I'm just gonna give you, the viewer, my thoughts on this masterpiece in hopes that my excitement will encourage some kind of, fanboy conversation, or maybe, an unsuspecting viewer to pick up the game. It has been years since I felt this way about a video game. The last time was back in 2010 when I played Tales of the Abyss for the PS2. Trust me, I thought about all the games I played, and yeah, that was the last time. I mean, Tales of the Abyss blew me away with character development and the ability to turn tropes on their heads, creating a memorable experience that I really haven't found since. Persona 5 in a lot of ways reminds me of Final Fantasy X and spending 8 hours fighting Jecht when I was under-leveled, unable to peel myself away from that game in hopes that I could, stay with it for as long as possible while I dealt with the tragedy of being a teenager. In a sense, I'd say Persona 5 is really the spiritual successor to all of those great JRPGs on the PlayStation 2. That was the golden era of gaming, and while we've gotten bigger and arguably better games, I feel like we've really moved away from what made JRPGs in the first place. And maybe that's why Persona 5 feels so special. It takes the concepts of those 6th generation games and puts a modern coat of paint over them. It allows you to experience being a teenager again. Now, if it sounds like I'm rambling, that's because I just don't really know how to talk about any part of this game without taking away from how it meshes with the whole. Everything here is layered, from the music to the graphics to the hoo boys of your guardian in his coffee shop. All of the elements would work well enough in any other game, but it's the sheer audacity of the entire piece that makes it all stand out. Since this is a review of sorts, I do actually need to eventually talk about why I think the game is so great, so I'm going to try to isolate those elements, but the warning here is, none of them sound all that great on their own. It's really how it all comes together that makes this so special. In many ways, Persona 5 is a typical look at a JRPG, but it does differentiate itself in its setting. Instead of taking place in a fantasy world, the game takes a more grounded approach. You play as a high schooler, wrongly accused of a crime. You're forced to live in the city under the skeptical eye of a coffee shop owner, going to school and making friends along the way. It isn't long, however, until a strange app appears on your phone. This allows you to enter the hearts of corrupt individuals and steal the cores of their sinful desires, ultimately enacting change in those people. If you've played Persona 3 or 4, this likely doesn't sound all that new or innovative. The series has been hitting these notes for over a decade, but never has it really had the same flair as in this game. You aren't a reluctant hero trying to stop a catastrophe, but instead just this teenager who discovers a mystical power and can change the essence of people who have wronged him. It actually has hints of Death Note and self-righteousness throughout, and it's impossible not to be caught up in the infectious excitement of the cast as they take action to gain fame, all the while knocking down scummy adults. Even the bloody menu isn't immune to this. The whole presentation is over the top, flashy on a level I've never seen in a game. There's a ridiculous amount of detail put into everything you see, and it's that level of polish that drew me in. Sure, the story was intriguing right off the bat, and the characters seemed cool, but it was the way the dialogue bubbles moved and bobbed, making it impossible to look away, that really drew me into this game. Now, I've played many RPGs before, but trust me when I say I have never seen anything as mundane as the text box look this good. And that same infectious attitude carries into the music. It borders on jazz a lot of the time, but it always has that rebellious edge that fits with the rest of the game. There's more than a few earworms here, and despite having heard the same music intermittently throughout the entire 99-hour playthrough, I never got sick of it. There are 2 songs in particular, though, that I really want to shed some light on. For copyright reasons, I'm not going to play them here, but I implore you to look up both Behind the Mask and Rivers in the Desert. The latter is a personal favorite of mine, and it just fits the scenes it's in so well. There's a reason the composer is one of 4 names listed in the opening animation, and the game honestly wouldn't be the same without him. Now, earlier I did mention character development, in particular with Tales of the Abyss. While Persona 5 doesn't quite reach that level of development, I did find myself just as connected to the characters. It's been said before, but Persona has a way with its characters. There are around 20 that you can interact with called confidants, and each confidant can be pursued to learn more about their backstory and struggles during the game's free time sections. These are genius, and I'm going to attempt to explain why. First, you have a limited amount of time. The game only gives you so much free time, and unless you have the time management skills of a god, you're not really going to have enough to do everything. What this means is that you have to choose who you spend your time with in a very meticulous manner. This immediately makes the events more meaningful, as you know you've specifically chosen this one person to grow closer to. The second thing that makes these really great is that the stories are all completely personal to the characters. The entire purpose is to tell you more about them outside of the primary plot, and because each character gets the same amount of confidant ranks, they all get equal spotlight in the smaller details. The third thing is that these skills actually have bearing on the combat. You're encouraged to become closer to these characters to understand them better, as well as make your dungeon crawling experience a little bit easier. Every time you use a skill, you know it came from the time you spent with that character, and that somehow makes the bond just that much better. Now, I'm not going to lie and say that every person in the game is as fleshed out as they could have been. There were a few confidants here and there that I really felt like were filler, and they didn't have a whole lot of impact on the overall story or your character. The best confidants here are those that are tied into the overarching themes of the game and actually have some sort of impact on the bigger issues at hand. Most of the characters fit into this, and they're pretty well done, and the ones that are greatly enhance the experience of the game, but there's others where I just kind of forget they exist. Now, when you aren't outside of dungeons building your relationships with these characters, you'll be running through palaces. These palaces are essentially the corrupted hearts of whichever target you are currently pursuing. They are all handcrafted unlike the previous games, and they're generally quite fun to explore. This is where the combat comes into play, and boy did I love it. As you run around, you'll find demons strewn about the map. Approaching these will result in a battle. I know, we're not dealing with really revolutionary stuff here. In each of these battles, each member of the party will then have their own demon or persona with special skills. Each persona has strengths and weaknesses to different elements, and exploiting these is key. If you use an element that the enemies are weak against, they'll be knocked down and you'll get another turn. This in turn allows you to use another move, or pass that turn to another member of your team, who can then further exploit the enemy's weaknesses. Once all the enemies are knocked down, you have the option to either perform a strong all-out attack that greatly damages the enemy, or you can talk to them. Talking to them, as I understand, is similar to previous Shin Megami Tensei games, although this feature it wasn't present in Persona 3 or 4. You can ask for an item, money, or for the demon to join your team. With the former two options, you'll sometimes be given the opportunity to push your luck and ask for more of that selection, which can result in either the enemy getting back up and hurting you, or successfully negotiating with them, which is kind of cool when you get extra money. This really adds a fun risk-reward system to the game, and it's a neat little feature that breaks up what can kind of be repetitive otherwise. If you ask a demon to join your team, on the other hand, you'll need to answer 2 questions. Based on the demon's reaction to these questions, they can either attack you, run away, or decide to join you. The latter allows you to have the main character utilize them in battle, creating a Pokemon-esque collectathon. Of course, in that game you don't behead your Pokemon to fuse them together into newer ones, but close enough. Now, I've heard of games that have great battle systems and characters, but usually I'm just pushing through dungeons in those games to get to the next story bit. The great thing about Persona 5 is that these dungeons are inherently linked to the story. Their layout tells you about the character that you are infiltrating, and there's story moments scattered throughout. With rare exception, these really never feel like a grind, and I never dreaded them more than I did the more character-focused moments of the game. The exception, though, does come in the form of mementos. This is a massive side dungeon where you can enact smaller changes of heart to help cure humanity of its awfulness. With each major palace you conquer, you unlock more of mementos. While it's not a terrible addition, the whole thing is randomized and kind of boring to look at. It's still worth doing, don't get me wrong, but I mean, you're not really missing too much if you don't get too heavily involved in it. Honestly, that's really the biggest fault with this game. The whole thing is so refreshing and well thought out that I honestly have a bit of trouble believing it exists. Even when going back to film some of the earlier portions for review footage, I found myself getting reabsorbed in the story, wanting nothing more than to start another playthrough. Though I did convince myself not to due to my ever-growing backlog, it's still a constant thought in my head, and if I'm not careful, I might get pulled back in. Persona 5 is an amazing game, and it might actually be my new favorite game. I knew I'd like it based on the roughly 20 hours I spent with Persona 4, but I had no idea how extreme my love for it would get. It's honestly making me want to go back and try out Persona 3 and maybe go back and finish Persona 4. It's going to be a long time though before a game captivates me like this one did, and I'm really sad to see it end. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you thought of the game if you played it. If you plan to play it, let me know so that I can geek out about it and tell you what a great idea you're making, and, you know, just all that good stuff. Thanks for watching, everybody. Take care. See you soon.